What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This isn't going to be me sitting down doing a solo show with you guys like it usually is. A few days ago, the guys over at Fantasy Stock Exchange, Bush and Danny, were nice enough to have me on the channel to talk some football, talk some shop. My first ever guest appearance on another man's podcast, so that was a really fun experience, a really fun time. And we were talking about the boy Antonio Gibson versus Najee Harris, and I think it was a really good discussion, a good back and forth about the value of each of those players, the good, the bad, and the ugly, who we're taking at ADP. And it was a fun discussion, and I might as well give you guys an extra piece of content this week and give them a new set of eyes, a new audience to kind of put their content towards. So I'm just going to kind of intro you guys here like I've just done. We're going to cue the intro, and then we're going to get right into the video that me and Bush recorded on Sunday. And let me know what you guys think. Make sure you go down below, subscribe, and leave a like. And while you're down there in the comment section, let me know if I should have somebody else on my channel, if I should be going on to somebody else's channel in the YouTube space. Let me know who your favorite creators are, I guess I want to ask. And while you're down there in the comment section, make sure you go up to the Discord. Make sure you join the Discord on there. We got the underdog drafts that I'm in. I always drop my links in there. We got mock drafts going on. We got trade advice going on with the community in the Discord. Just a dope place to house everybody that fucks with the channel, everyone that fucks with what I'm doing in one spot. So before I keep on rambling, let's talk some Antonio Gibson, some Najee Harris. Let's go.
Thirsty, thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
Okay, so as I mentioned, RB14 Antonio Gibson, RB13 Najee Harris currently going off the board in underdog ADP. They're going off the board at 18th overall and 16th overall, respectively. So like we said, these are mid-second round picks. These ones count. There's a lot of good for these guys, obviously going as high as they're going. We're going to start with the good for Antonio Gibson is the first guy that we're going to talk about. So, Ron, I'll let you take it away with why Antonio Gibson's going so high.
Of course. And Antonio Gibson's, it's crazy because with Antonio Gibson, I wasn't super high on him coming out because I liked Darius Geis coming out, and then that kind of just absolutely unraveled itself. But Gibson comes in and he puts up 795 rushing yards, 36 catches, 247 receiving yards, and 11 total touchdowns as a rookie. He was behind James Robinson and Jonathan Taylor. He was the best points per game rookie last year. He was the RB15 in 0.5 PPR points per game as a rookie. So that's already super impressive. He already did better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had everything lined up for him. First round pick, he comes into the Chiefs offense. Antonio Gibson, he goes out there in the Washington football offense and does this. And I think that even the RB15 is kind of selling him short because he gets hurt in week 13. It was turf toe or something like that. So then he comes out, he played a little bit in week 13, gets hurt against the Steelers. He comes out week 16, week 17. He never exceeds 10 points. He's kind of a shell of himself. So that honestly skews his points per game total. If you look at just the weeks 1 through 12, he was the RB8 in points per game. Like literally the RB8, like a top 12, top 8 difference maker in your lineup, RB1, set and forget it. And I'm so excited for Antonio Gibson because I feel like even though RB8 last year, that's a crazy number to hit. It was a weaker RB class, so take that like a little bit lighter. You had Saquon go down, you had McCaffrey go down. But Antonio Gibson, there's so much meat left on the bone. He produced RB1 numbers as a rookie behind an offense that had the 32nd offensive DOA. They had a mixture of Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen at QB. I mean, we're talking like bottom tier QB play, and he was still the RB8. So that offense, it can only go up from here. They bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, who I'll be honest, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think a lot of people are saying like he's going to be the Jameis Winston of this offense, but I think at the very least he's an upgrade to Alex Smith. I wouldn't say that he's going to just kind of be the tide that just sort of rises all ships. But you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, huge upgrade. You get Curtis Samuel, Diami Brown, McLaurin, Logan Thomas. This is a legit offense we're dealing with here. And I like to look at Mike Clay's projections because he's very conservative and he's kind of like non-biased. He has them projected as the 16th best offensive unit in the NFL and has them as a top 12 team projected for top 12 in rushing TDs and passing TDs. So they're going to score more points. They're going to be efficient overall. And then you're getting that defense in year 2. So Chase Young is going to be a stud. You got all those studs on that Washington football defense. So that game script, it was 25th last year. They were down in games by like 4 points at the average. At any point in time, they were down 4 points. I think we're going to see that go to like 15. So he's going to be in an offense, the RB1 on a good team. And now he's going to be in that lead back role going into year 2.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The situation has improved so dramatically around Antonio Gibson. And the weird thing to me is I've legitimately heard other analysts say that he's not going to score 11 rushing touchdowns again. And I'm like, why the hell not? Why would he not score more rushing touchdowns again. He proved to be efficient in that role last year. And this is a situation, as you mentioned, that has only gotten better. They bring in probably a borderline top 15 quarterback in the NFL and Ryan Fitzpatrick, certainly an upgrade over what they had last year. Like you said, 32nd rank in DVOA. I believe they scored the 25th most points in the NFL last year, the Washington football team. So when you're looking at the situation, they also added to the offensive line. They also added Charles Leno Jr., left tackle from the Bears. They're bringing him in. They drafted Sam Cosmi in the second round. They bring back Eric Flowers, who kind of had a career resurgence at guard for them in 2019. He's now back on their offensive line. And this was already an offensive line last year that was top 10 in PFF run blocking. So to me, the situation is actually very good for Antonio Gibson. It's the reason I feel comfortable projecting his floor. And for those of you guys that don't know anything about Antonio Gibson's college profile, this is a guy that legitimately played wide receiver in college. If anybody was going to have a pass for struggling their rookie season, it would have been Antonio Gibson. He was not a running back in college. He's never played running back before. And he came into the league and he was, top of the league in a number of running back related metrics. When you watch him on film, he displayed good vision. He was elusive. He was great after the catch when he was given receiving opportunities. And I wrote an article for the Fantasy Scouts a number of weeks ago saying that this dude's the next Christian McCaffrey. And the reason I said it was more of a dynasty related thing, but I think it applies to redraft as well, obviously. And in that article, I discussed where Gibson's ceiling comes from. And the reason his ceiling is what it is because of the coaching staff that's in place. They have Scott Turner. They have Ron Rivera. Those guys made Christian McCaffrey what he is. Christian McCaffrey was an excellent player coming out of Stanford, but in his rookie season, he was a guy that was like a 50, 60% opportunity share running back, just like Antonio Gibson. And they brought in CJ Anderson. All of us thought that, CJ Anderson's going to play the Jonathan Stewart role, and it never happened. Christian McCaffrey was a bell cow running back that year.
And I wanted to add on to that little wrinkle, because I think the reason why I'm so high on Gibson is, like you said, he has that McCaffrey upside. He is an RB1 at the very least, but if they unlock that receiving upside, I looked at his college PFF stats, and he lined up in the slot at Memphis 87.1% of the time and had an average depth of target of 10.5. So he's a more than qualified receiver. He can line up in the slot and run routes where he's legitimately getting open 10 plus yards down the field. And what is like so exciting about Antonio Gibson is this guy, he can just get the fucking ball 10 yards down the field. He had an 11.7 yards after catch per reception. So he's running out of the slot, getting opened around the first down marker. He's getting the ball, and then he is making three dudes miss and busting it wide open down the field. It's like he's almost overqualified to play running back and catch passes out of the backfield. Like, he can dump offs and swings. He's more than fine to do all that stuff. And I think that's where we're going to see that next step for him. He only saw an 8.9% target share last year, and he was still an RB1 without having that ceiling really unlocked. So like you said, we have that McCaffrey type ceiling where Ron Rivera says, all right, we're going to feed this guy touches. We're going to feed him targets out of the backfield. That's when we see that year two unlock. And it really reminds me, like you said, McCaffrey. And it reminds me of what happened with David Johnson. After his rookie year with the Cardinals, he showed all that receiving ability, really explosive playmaker. They come out the next season and they say, all right, David Johnson's our guy, RB1 in fantasy. Like, that's the kind of upside we're talking about here, like RB1 overall.
Right, exactly. And we saw Gibson already impress the coaching staff in his limited time in training camp last year, to the point that everybody on that offense became expendable. I know Darius Geis got his own, demons where he was doing some shit that got him cut, but he literally, Antonio Gibson got Adrian Peterson cut last year. He was the reason Adrian Peterson was cut. When Adrian Peterson was released, and this will be on the screen right now, he legitimately said that Ron Rivera sat him down and they wanted one pony style, basically like a Christian McCaffrey type of running back, to do it all, to be the runner, to be the primary receiving threat out of the backfield. And obviously we didn't see that to the extent that we wanted to in Antonio Gibson's rookie year. But like I said, this was a guy who did not play running back in college. And the big hurdle for him was pass protection. In college, Kenny Gainwell was the running back, and he stayed in on pass protection. He was very good in that role. As one of the biggest strengths of Kenneth Gainwell's games was pass protection. So hopefully Antonio Gibson can learn this in his second year and be able to take that next step as a 3-down player, because we know that they're going to give him every opportunity to be that 3-down workhorse. We've seen it with the Turner offensive coordinators in the past, and we've seen it with Ron Rivera in the past. And all the clues and discussion topics that I've talked about so far are listed in that article. So if you want more information, it'll be linked in the description. You can go read that article and see all the things that the coaching staff, the front office, teammates, quarterbacks have been saying about Antonio Gibson since he's got there. I basically went through and pulled everything, all the Roto World clickbait that I could find. And that's basically all that we can look forward to with Antonio Gibson is that potential. And like you said, even if he doesn't hit that, right? Even we're totally wrong, he doesn't hit that Christian McCaffrey-like potential. This was still a guy who was a top 8 running back in points per game on the field last year, ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a 25th ranked offense, 32nd in DVOA. Okay, so that was all the good. Now we're going to get into what's bad. And obviously there's going to be less bad than good because we're talking about a second round pick here, but there is some bad. And I'm sure people are screaming at their monitors right now. How could you not bring up JD McKissic, right? JD McKissic is the bad. That's the concern with Antonio Gibson. There's only one thing in his bad column, and it's JD McKissic. And here's why I'm not as worried about JD McKissic. And here's why you shouldn't also be as worried about JD McKissic if you're currently really concerned about him. One, he's an average running back. He's really not that special of a player. He's a good third down back. He's okay on early downs, but this is not a guy that we were scared of coming into the season, right? When Antonio Gibson was getting all that hype in the summer, nobody was like, oh, but what about JD McKissic? Like, no, only last year when we actually saw him on the field were we actually concerned with this guy. Number two, Gibson was thrust into a workhorse role and was able to handle it last year, despite being new to the position, I might add. And JD McKissic was there out of necessity, not because Antonio Gibson, they don't want to have him a 3-down workhorse. And three, JD McKissic, here's the real thing, right? I'm sure a lot of people don't know this. JD McKissic had 679 snaps on offense last year. 226 of them came outside of the backfield. And my projection is that the signing of Curtis Samuel specifically is, along with what Antonio Gibson is probably going to do in his second year, is going to make JD McKissic relatively, useless for fantasy. Let's just put it that way. He'll probably be a thorn in Gibson's side to some degree, but anybody who thinks that JD McKissic is going to have 114 targets or whatever he had last year, again, it's not happening. I'm telling you right now, they signed Curtis Samuel to take over what JD McKissic was doing last year. JD McKissic was basically their slot receiver because they had Cam Sims and whoever else playing that role.
Even Sims
is pretty much made irrelevant by the Curtis Samuel signing, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that McKissic, as much as it's an issue for Antonio Gibson, it's more, I think all that JD McKissic does is he limits that RB1 ceiling we're talking about. But that's already at the upper range of his outcomes. If he's that undeniable, then JD McKissic won't matter. And to add on to the bad, because I want to be fully transparent with the bad, is Antonio Gibson, like his toe turf injury. So that came out a couple weeks ago. I have the roto blurb, and it's what sat him out at the back end of last season. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to say, he will be ready by week 1, but it's something to monitor throughout the summer. So I'm somebody that I put a red flag on a guy if he has a lower body injury that's nagging him. Like, this is what happened with Miles Sanders and Kenyon Drake last year. They were in some sort of lower body injury in August. And when we started getting into preseason games where guys are supposed to be fit and it's holding them back, that's when you should be concerned. But when we're doing drafts now and we're planning now, as of right now, it looks like everything will be fine, but that's something else to add in for the bad with Gibson.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually in my ugly column. That's the ugly with Gibson. So I am a bit ugly about it, right? I am concerned about it. And Gibson is apparently still recovering from this injury, right? And that's the concerning part, right? That he suffered this injury, like you said, in week 13 or 14 against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Long time
missed
ago.
2 games because of it, and came back from a multi-week injury in week 16 or whatever against the Panthers and was limited in that game. If the fact that he's still dealing with this is concerning, and I'm not a doctor, my complete non-doctor opinion is that I'm not concerned right now until I hear some more information. But docs that I trust and that I follow on Twitter and stuff, I've listened to some of the things that they've been saying about it, and they think that it's something that's going to linger. And if it does, come up again, let's say he's limited in training camp, or we hear turf toe mentioned throughout training camp or the preseason, he's going to be off my board entirely. Like, as much good as there is about Antonio Gibson, my one fundamental philosophy of drafting running backs early is that if they're coming into the season with an injury, off my board.
Yeah.
That was the case with Miles Sanders last year, right? I put out, if you guys aren't following right now, we put out a TikTok account. We just started our TikTok account, and I put out the first TikTok comparing Cam Akers' situation to Miles Sanders last year. And in that TikTok, I said that Miles Sanders had a lower body injury. It was a hamstring injury, I believe, in mid-August. And that took him completely out of consideration for me in drafts, because when you have a running back that we project workhorse volume, if he's already coming into the season with an injury, you can pretty much throw out the term workhorse at that point, because the coaching staff isn't stupid. They're not going to feed a guy who's injured.
Exactly.
So anything else on Gibson, or should we move on to the second running back of this video?
No, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk some Najee Harris, man.
Right. And for what it's worth, I like both of these guys. I think they're both great second round picks. And Najee Harris is currently going one pick in terms of running backs ahead of Antonio Gibson. He's RB13 off the board. And the good with Najee Harris is there's one very obvious, thing that people will still stand by to this day in fantasy football. And that volume is and always will be the easiest path to running back fantasy success, right? Volume is king, right? Harris has virtually no competition in his backfield. He has Benny Snell to compete with for early down work, and he has, Jalen Samuels and Anthony McFarland for receiving work. And he should likely see a minimum 65% opportunity share or better from the beginning, from week one. And that what Najee Harris in his own right too is a tremendous prospect. Because we're getting into redraft season right now, I know we have some newer listeners. So if you don't know who Najee Harris is, or if you're, you just know a little bit about him, pound for pound, this guy might have been the most elusive running back in the entire class. He had fantastic feet, Le'Veon Bell-like patience. That's the type of running style that we're talking about. And despite his size, he doesn't run like Derrick Henry. He doesn't run like Frank Gore. He has some wiggle. He has some patience. And the Le'Veon Bell similarities, I'm guessing, is what led the Pittsburgh Steelers to spend a first-round pick, 24th overall, on this running back.
Yeah, exactly. And they're gonna feed this guy. He's not he's 230 pounds we're talking about. He caught 43 balls at Alabama, so he's going to be this all-purpose back. And I think he's going to be fed 300 touches, and I think that you can really prop up his whole case is going to be the touches. He has that really safe floor, and when we're talking about these round 2 picks, like we said in the opener, this can sink or swim your draft. So you want to have those guys that can really come in and just not screw the whole thing up. And he feels a lot. I kind of compare his situation right now to how it felt drafting Josh Jacobs his rookie year. He came into the Raiders spot. We all knew first round pick, he's going to get fed, and he was the RB13 in his rookie season. And that is right about where Najee Harris is going. So that sounds right about where Najee Harris is projected in year one in Pittsburgh.
What's funny is that I also compared him to a former first-round running back, but I compare his situation the way, and again, they're not really the same type of player. They kind of are, but the situation that I see with Najee Harris is what we saw from Saquon Barkley his rookie year. And the reason I say that, and I don't think Najee Harris is near the prospect that Saquon Barkley is, they're pretty similar in some ways with the receiving ability and the way that they're able to, make guys miss and some of the big plays and the hurdles, of course. But we're looking at a situation where an offense and a team brought in a running back to help take the pressure off their old quarterback, right? The same thing happened with Saquon Barkley taking the pressure off of Eli Manning in 2018. I think in both situations, the quarterback is washed, right? I think both Ben right now and Eli in 2018 were washed up quarterbacks. Thankfully, Najee Harris, much like Saquon Barkley that year, has some receiving weapons to take some, pressure off of him. He's got Claypool and Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster, and they have, 2 solid tight ends that can take some attention away from him. And again, we saw that with Saquon his rookie year. He had Odell on the outside, Sterling Shepard in the slot. Evan Ingram was still an ascending player at that point. One thing that Gibson and Harris both have in common, like I said, is that both of these coaching staff love feeding workhorse running backs, right? Tomlin consistently, in the days of Le'Veon Bell, fed him an elite opportunity share. Even when he had James Conner, who might not even be considered a workhorse running back, still fed him workhorse volume. D'Angelo Williams, when he subbed in for Le'Veon Bell, workhorse volume. He'll give you a workhorse role whether you've earned it or not. And basically that was the same case with Ron Rivera and with Scott Turner on Antonio Gibson's side of things. So you can understand why I like both of these running backs. It's the fact that the volume is probably going to be there for both guys. But the situation, like I said, the one that I kind of compare it to and what we had to see with Saquon Barkley was an elite talent. And I think Najee Harris has that potential.
I can see that for sure. I'll push back on that a little bit because I'm a little bit lower on Najee Harris, and I think that would be a good time to look at the bad with Najee Harris. And I think that the thesis behind liking Najee Harris is if you think that he is an elite prospect, then he 100% has that Saquon Barkley upside. I would push back from the standpoint that the Steelers' offensive line for me is super concerning. The Steelers' offensive line, they were the second worst run blocking unit in 2020. They come into 2021 ranked 29th in PFF's 2021 offensive line ranks. So this is going to be tough for Najee Harris, especially because I haven't done the research on what Penn State's offensive line was, but when we're talking about Najee Harris, we're talking about that Alabama offensive line. So they were second and 9th best run blocking unit in the Power 5 in 2019 and 2020. And everybody knows they had plethora of NFL talents. We're talking Jedrick Wills, Alex Leatherwood, Evan Neal, who's going to go top 5 next year, Landon Dickerson. And I love Graham Barfield stuff. You probably are familiar with Graham Barfield, but he does the yards created stuff. And he takes the stat that he calls yards blocked per attempt. So that takes what the offensive line opens up for their running back on a given attempt. And Najee Harris ranked in the 90th percentile of yards blocked per attempt with 1.8 yards blocked per attempt. So he had the most help given to him by the offensive line that I've seen in a while. And that accounted for 31% of his rushing yards in his senior season. So I feel the offensive line, I'm not saying that he can't do it. We just haven't seen it yet where he's behind an offensive line with some holes and he's got to really make and create things for himself.
Right. And I'll get into more of the bad in a second because there is more bad, in my opinion, than there with Najee Harris than there is with Gibson. But one thing that is in his favor is new offensive coordinator Matt Canada, shout out Canada, is notorious for running a Rams, 49ers, Titans, Packers-like scheme, right? He's going to run a wide zone scheme with a lot of window dressing and jet motion and stuff like that Najee Harris is familiar with running because Steve Sarkisian runs a similar scheme. And that should make the transition easier, and it should also steer away from the archaic running style that the Steelers were running last year, which was all power concepts that didn't work at all because they didn't have a good offensive line, nor did they have good running backs to run in the scheme. But like you mentioned, the bad with this situation, like I mentioned with the Saquon comparison, I don't trust Big Ben. I think he's washed up. I think he's cooked. And I don't think Ben has enough left in the tank to lead a top 10 unit, despite the weapons that he has, because he has some great weapons. And Le'Veon Bell, when we saw him in his prime, he was in the top 15 offense at worst every single year. And most of the time it was in the top 8 scoring. So how much can we expect Najee Harris to get scoring opportunities? And another thing that's against him is that even with a stud workhorse like Le'Veon Bell, the Steelers ran the ball in the red zone in 2016 and 2017 among the bottom 12 teams in the NFL, despite having one of the best running backs in the league. And it was the 6th highest rate of pass inside the 10-yard line in 2017, 10th highest in 2016. So if you go back and look at Le'Veon Bell's seasons, you can see he doesn't really have that many touchdowns. And the reason is it's just the way the Steelers operated. Maybe it'll change with Matt Canada. Maybe they'll go towards more of a run-heavy approach in the red zone. We know that the Rams, 49ers, Titans, and Packers all do with the similar schemes. So maybe that'll change. But that is one concern for me, is that I think a lot of people are going to project Najee Harris for more rushing touchdowns too.
Yeah, and I was actually going to bring up on Mike Clay's projections. I love looking at his stuff. He has them projected for the 32nd amount of rush attempts, like just on the entire season. So he thinks that this is still going to be a team that's going to pass the football. And I can't give you a rhyme or reason for that. I guess it's probably just historical trends with Mike Tomlin in the past couple of years. And I think, like you said, Ben is cooked at this point. You know, he's out there. It's going to come to a point where they're going to have to pull him off the field on Hail Marys. You know, they're going to have to just throw in Haskins and have him chuck it 60 yards on the field. I don't think that Ben's getting there anymore. And it's interesting you brought the comparison up with the Rams, because Ben Roethlisberger last year, he graded out as the 6th worst quarterback in passing grade on PFF up there. He was pretty much in the Jared Goff, Drew Lock area. So we're talking like tough. And what it kind of reminds me of is the 2020 Rams. So you have Woods, you have Kupp, you have all the talent in the world, you have Akers in the backfield. And Goff just, he just can't get things going. That's why everyone kind of saw a little bit of a tick down. And what's going to push this team to pass more and be behind more in games is I love looking at Warren Sharp's strength of schedule. So that it's not just the records from last year, it's the projected Vegas record. So it pretty much your average opponent, what their Vegas win total is implied, that's going to be your strength of schedule. The Steelers are all the way at the bottom with the toughest schedule. So they're going to be behind in games. They're going to be playing from behind. It's not going to be like you'd think, because their defense is really good. They're able to stay up in games and they could just run it up the middle. There's going to be a lot more pass attempts than I think people would like to see with Najee Harris.
Right. And their defense took some hits, right? Like Bud Dupree's gone. They lost Cam Sutton, like some of their best like secondary pieces. Like their defense isn't as good as it was, early in the season last year. Devin Bush coming off an ACL tear. Like, it's going to be a good defense, I'd imagine. I don't think it's going to be the best defense in the league, which is what it was for the first couple of weeks of last year. And you mentioned the offensive line comparison, 32nd in the NFL in adjusted line yards, according to Football Outsiders, 28th in runs that were stuffed, percentage of runs that were stuffed, 31st in PFF run blocking. And like you said, ranked poorly again, projecting forward. And They added some pieces to their offensive line, but no one that's going to make a huge difference, I'd imagine, in early in the season. They lost Alejandro Villanueva, their left tackle. They lost Marquise Pouncey, their center, and they lost their right tackle, Matt Filer. Zach Banner played a little bit last year, so that's not as big of a loss. But aside from David DeCastro, he's really their only plus starter on the offensive line, and even he regressed a little bit last year.
And I keep hearing Kendrick Green from, the Najee Harris hive and the Steelers hive that they want to sell me on this like 5th rounder from Illinois. You're not going to be able to overhaul an offensive line overnight with the draft class. Let's say you get like Penei Sewell or
especially
something.
Especially without Munchak now, right? Because this offensive line has been going downhill ever since Mike Munchak, their offensive line coach, has been coaching the Broncos. And we saw what Mike Munchak did for Garrett Bowles in 1 year.
And speaking of the Broncos, we could see, going back to the Ben point, we're assuming that he's going to be what he was last year. He could just fall off that Peyton Manning cliff and just be fucking awful, just throwing picks. And that's when they bring in a guy like Brock Osweiler. But instead, this time it's Mason Rudolph. And all of a sudden, now Najee Harris is running on an offense that just can't move the ball. Like that year, remember like Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph? It was ugly, man. Like he's an injury risk too. Like it's a little bit fragile, more fragile than you like to see.
Right. And I think situation-wise, Gibson versus Harris, it's really not that close for me, in my opinion. The one bright spot that, again, someone might be yelling at their monitor right now telling us, Ben Roethlisberger's probably going to check down a lot, which, again, goes back to the Saquon Barkley comparison that I made. Eli Manning just fed that dude in the passing game that year, and it definitely could be the case, right? That's where, like we said, Najee Harris's value is going to come from volume, whether it's in the rushing game, whether it's in the receiving game. Probably won't be a high-scoring offense, but if he can get the volume, he can absolutely be a top 8, top 5 running back in fantasy because he's that talented and he's expected to see that much volume. So do you have an opinion one way or another? Which one, if you're on the board right now, you got to choose Gibson or Najee Harris. Who are you taking?
For me, it's Antonio Gibson all day. And I'll tell you why. Antonio Gibson, for me, here's the thing. Like if you're all in on Najee Harris, the prospect, I can completely get it because then he could have a Jonathan Taylor type season. He comes in there, he balls out, and especially towards that back end of the season, he can win things for you. But with Gibson, I think that if we saw Najee Harris give you an RB13 season, RB12 season, RB10, 11, that'd be a win, right? But that's already expected with Antonio Gibson. We saw that last year, and that feels like his floor almost. Top 10 running back. I just don't think that Najee Harris in year one has that McCaffrey, David Johnson type gear that me and you really think that he could kick it into with Rivera and the passing down, or just like him just being a crazy route runner, crazy athlete. He just has that profile of like, oh, yep, like he won everybody leagues last year. Like that just makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't even mention his size himself too. He's also a 230-pound running back, and he's got the breakaway speed that Najee Harris doesn't have. So we could even see some more big plays out of a guy like Antonio Gibson, which we all know help us win weeks in fantasy too. So yes, I will agree with you. I would take Antonio Gibson. Gun to my head, I'm on the clock right now. I would absolutely take Antonio Gibson over Najee Harris. It's not that I think Najee Harris is a bad player, but he's a guy that I'm not willing to pick until about the end of the second round just because of those concerns that lower his floor. And like you said, Antonio Gibson, his floor to me is a top 15 running back. I don't think Najee Harris's floor is a top 15 running back because of the offensive line, because of the offense and the scoring opportunities that he might not see. It could be a Melvin Gordon's rookie year situation on the low end side of things.
Yeah, that's a good pull. I think Melvin Gordon is probably his floor.
Yeah. Okay. So if you guys enjoyed that, as always, when we have guests on, make sure you guys go check out our guests' work. Ron, you can plug yourself right now if you want to.
All right. As always, man, you can follow me at @RonStewart_ on Twitter. Check out the channel, just Ron Stewart on YouTube. And that's pretty much all I'm pushing right now. Just my Twitter, YouTube, trying to grow a little bit of an audience, have fun with you guys, put out some content, and just trying to do. I'm going to give everybody that tunes in all I can give them throughout the summer, man.
Right. And if you guys have made it to this point in the video, I want you to comment down below basements, because we're both repping our mom's basements right now. And we're proud of it. We're both trying to build audiences right now. It's what you got to do. You got to be in the mom's basement. So peace out, guys, and enjoy your Tuesday.
Cause it's so crisp. The most broken gold stockbroker when I solstice. I could win an Oscar. Russian accent, horse Acid addict, cross the avid actor.